Dads, your boy Big Dave, back with another episode of Culture Dads, Age of Sword and Cassette, where two based publishing dads do deep dives into retro pop culture for folkish and dissonant minds. So, we had Mr. Mike dropped a new book, the Imperium Anthology of English Verse, which is a beautiful, wonderful collection of poetry. And in honor of that, we have Mr. Taerus on riding shotgun with us to talk about poetry, since he is a poet himself. What's up, boys?
How are you, Dave?
Doing good.
Yeah, it's nice to be on.
Excellent. This morning we're going to talk about poetry, and because there's a little bit of a something in modernity that really sticks in my craw. I hate this aspect of our modern culture, and it's this assumption that poetry is gay. And I want to take this assumption, this belief, I want to break into its house. And as it screams and terror fills its eyes, I want to wrap my hands around its throat and strangle the life out of it. And then I want to throw its corpse into a ditch and leave it there behind for like, yeah, a little fun. But I hate it. I hate it. Poetry to me is something that is beautiful and wonderful and a staple of Western artistic expression, and has been from the beginning of time. It was probably one of our oldest forms of art, forms of expression. It's all of our old sacred poetry is poetry. All of our old writings is in meter. Everything about how we used to write was poetic, right? And it wasn't up until recently that people developed this thing that poetry is for beatniks or nerds or homos or pussies or art and like all, and I just think that sucks, because poetry traditionally is a warrior's art form, right? This is something that has been true from the ancient times going all the way up into the world wars. You can read veterans, soldiers from world wars, from World War I in the trenches writing poetry. These guys were in the trenches getting bombed, gassed, all this stuff. And they sat down and they spilled their heart and soul about what they were seeing on the battlefield onto the written page in the form of poetry. So if you know, I don't understand how that, well, I do understand. What happened was, you know, there's a bunch of goofballs, a bunch of hipsters that picked it up and started doing this postmodern, like talking about their inner stuff. But that's not traditionally how poetry was seen, and I really would love to change that. And with us today is an actual warrior poet, Mr. Taerus. So, Mr. Taerus, how did you get into poetry, and kind of give us your story, man.
Well, I got into poetry kind of as an aside to my music. So I used to write a lot of music. I play a lot of guitar. Really heavy, extreme, borderline unlistenable stuff. And eventually I just didn't have access to my guitars all the time, and I would write, and poetry kind of developed out of that. So most of the stuff that I write has a very rhythmical quality to it, because it's a branch out of music, basically.
Borderline unlistenable stuff it's a man after my own heart. Dave understands this after the post-punk episode.
Yeah. Yeah, also I totally get coming from a background of music too, you know. I mean, especially metal, you know. I mean, I'm a metal guy, played in extreme metal bands, and that's something that I write poetry as well. When I write poetry, I think there should have musicality to it. So that's something, you know, there should be a rhythm. I don't quite understand people that write poetry and there's kind of no form to it and everything. And I think that's part of when somebody hears poetry, they think it's like some smarmy, pretentious coffee shop and like some like soy boys with sloped shoulders going up, and there's like some douchebag playing some bongos. You know what I mean? I think that's what people picture, but that's not what's in my head when I think about poetry. So when it comes to poetry, well, actually, Taerus, you have a pretty interesting story that you have a pretty interesting story of everything that you got going on right now. Is that something that you're at liberty to talk about?
Yeah, for sure. I can talk about that to no end.
Yeah, let's hear a little bit about that, because that leads into kind of your project that you're doing right now, or you have done.
Yeah, well, I've been fighting on the front line in Ukraine since about. I got there about a week after the war actually started. I know, obviously, it's very controversial in our circles, but I was there for my own personal reasons. I'm on leave at the minute, which is why I can do this, and you're not hearing shells going off in the background. But yeah, and I when you say that there are guys sat in the trenches writing poetry, I was in that situation. Some of my stuff has been written under fire, which is, I guess, a point of pride. There's not really a lot else you can do when artillery comes in. You're not going to go for a jog or start doing push-ups, so you have to find some way to pass the time.
So do you come from a military background, or is this your first time like in combat? You're just a tough guy that's just like, all right, I'm going to pull up.
I was in the army, but I never deployed anywhere. I got injured and medically discharged. And I'd been living in Ukraine for a little while, doing pagan religious work.
Mm-hmm.
I'd lived there because you get a 90-day visa, so I'd go there for 89 days and then come back and then go over there again. So when the war started, I actually already had a holiday booked to go there. So it was just changing the transport.
And I gotta ask you, since here in the West we get all kinds of different propaganda about everything that's going on over there. Can you kind of give us what is going on the ground there?
It's such a vast front line with different types of fighting in different places. Like, for example, Bakhmut is just human waves. Where I was in Izium, it was mainly an artillery battle. There was lots of vehicles. It was very, very rare that there would be any kind of infantry engagements of man on man. It's a little bit depressing in some ways, because you're at all the risk, but all you're doing is sitting and watching two lots of artillery firing over your head at each other. So there is it varies. It varies from front to front.
Mm. So
it's an interesting perspective. There's not a lot of guys in our circles, and especially not a lot of content creators that can really, give a firsthand perspective of what's going on there and everything. And I find it interesting that you've decided to go, and obviously you have your own reasons and everything, but I'm sure that the martial spirit is sort of underlying a lot of that, and that really comes through in your poetry. So now I'm just going to mention here that we are Imperial Press is going to be doing a book with Taerus. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this book, because I am very excited about this. We've been talking about it, you and myself, for maybe a year now, or a year and a half. It's been a long time coming, and I've seen it. It's written, and it's something quite special. So can you just describe it for us?
Yeah, so it's called Song of Berlin, which is a kind of riff on the Iliad, which is the Song of Ilium. And it's essentially a retelling of the Iliad set in the second, a kind of amalgamation of the First and Second World Wars. And it's kind of, I've made jokes in the past about it being almost self-defeating, because I'm proving that the Iliad is timeless and doesn't need to be modernized by modernizing it. And the idea that these kinds of heroes, this kind of martial spirit, can be found in any war at any time. Tactics and equipment and that sort of thing changes, flags and goals and things like that change, but ultimately the same kind of warriors find themselves in the same kinds of situations. And it's by taking these, I hesitate to say archetypes, but taking these heroes and putting them in a different war with different tactics and different equipment shows you how they're not just limited to one point in time in one specific place.
Yeah, and what I find especially interesting about it is that this is an epic poem. I forget how many words it is, but it's a a full. I think it's 12 books. Is it? It's a long poem. It is a full, like, it's going to be quite a nice tome to have on your desk here, and it's written in a meter, isn't it?
Yes.
Now this is something that I think is really important, and it's a very attractive feature of the book. Apart from the fact that the poetry is just beautiful and consistently good all the way through from what I've seen, it is like the metered aspect of it, I think, is really, really important when it comes to poetry, because it has a kind of effect on the listener. So before we dive into like what it is that poetry is kind of doing that prose can't, which is, I think, an important part of this discussion, can you tell us a little bit about the prosody of your own poem?
Well, as I mentioned about the sort of branching out of musicality, I couldn't fathom the idea of writing some big epic poem without some kind of rhythm. To me, this idea of just typing up a paragraph and then hitting the enter key at random points it's not poetry. It's pretentious wankery. But in terms of the Iliad itself had a meter. For me to try and adapt the spirit of the Iliad, I would have to. I couldn't quite get it in the original meter, but something that flowed. And the idea of it is that it kind of carries you with the story. You with the rhythm and the rhyme, you go through the process of the narrative rather than getting bogged down on describing a specific aspect. It's in some ways it's a little bit cheating, because you can just move to the next point rather than having to describe a certain thing and set it up as like an element of the world and describe the whole thing like Tolkien does with his world building. You can just focus on the characters and the narrative and the emotional impact of the events of the story, and you don't have to get bogged down, because I am one of those people where if I try to world build, I'll just sit there and world build and just never tell a story. You're just world building. Whereas this was a brilliant way to just constantly keep the flow of the narrative going.
Yeah, that's the world building thing is a big problem in fiction writing, in the fiction scene. You get guys that just, I think it's probably because we grow up nowadays really into things like Warhammer 40K and Lord of the Rings and I don't know, whatever Dune, and these kinds of settings that are absolutely massive and are really cool and fun and interesting and all this kind of stuff. We become these people that just love lore and love world building and all of this kind of stuff, and we assume that is what we should express in our art. So a lot of times, like for example, when I'm doing Bizarchive submissions, I can't tell you how often I get a short story, because we publish short stories that starts out with this big exposition about the world, instead of just like, you have 1,000 between 1,000 and 6,000 words to tell a story, and they start out with like a whole page of exposition or some type of sneaky way to do exposition and world building instead of just throwing you in with the characters. And that's something that's been lost. Not and it could branch into epic poetry or anything really, is that people have kind of lost sight of what is the core, what is the sauce, the secret sauce of storytelling, and that is the action. That is the I guess you could say like the archetypes in the story, or the characters in the story, depending on what kind of story you're telling. It's about the characters overcoming their obstacles. It's about the action. It's about the movement and the pace of the story. It's not necessarily the reader doesn't need to know that the place has two suns and the weather patterns and the culture over the last 1,000 years and how many kings there were. The reader doesn't really need to know all that. He just needs to know about the story. So world building is like, I just had to throw that in there, that we need to less world building and we need to worry more about characters in storytelling, period.
Well, what's interesting about Taerus's poem is that, I mean, clearly some world building has gone on, and there's characters and they're developed and they have, they're living, breathing entities and everything. But it's set in a setting that is real and that in some sense is our mythos, right? Like when you read the Iliad or when you read the Odyssey, it's set in medias res, right? Like that is, you're thrown into the thick of it, which is what you're saying, Dave. I mean, 1,000 words of exposition is just going to put the reader to sleep, but it's necessary if you're sort of like just building this world from scratch. Maybe not necessary, but it's helpful, I suppose, this info dump. But a Greek, sitting around and listening to like a 3-day recitation of the Iliad doesn't need the info dump because it's his cultural background, his whole mythos. He understands, he knows who Achilles is. He knows, what the Eros throwing the golden apple into the fray and everything. He knows all of this stuff, right? That doesn't need to be explained. And this is in some sense also what Song of Berlin is doing. So like it does actually work very well as epic poetry in the ancient mode. But yeah, no, I think that it was quite an interesting choice to do poetry over prose. Of course, if you're gonna do it like, if you're going to do sort of like homage to Homer, it's going to have to be in meter. But there are some things that poetry can do just from a structural level that prose can't. And it comes through in this epic poem. It comes through, in the anthology that we've just put out. But not everybody likes poetry. And you'd be surprised how many people in our scene find it gay, just genuinely. And like, which is just to say that most people today prefer straight prose. Even literature people mostly prefer prose. But poetry does some things that prose doesn't. And I think that it's very important to underline this stuff. The first thing that it does that I think is important is it imposes constraint on art. And freedom within constraint, like constraint is the lifeblood of good art. Total freedom is the enemy, right? And this is what you were saying, Dave, about free verse and everything. And I actually am not opposed to free verse, but I'm going to try and remember the quote from memory. T.S. Eliot once said, "No free verse is totally free to the man who wants to do a good job of it." Right? So you need some sort of constraints even in free verse, or else it's just going to be like vomit, really. Look at slam poetry, right? Like go to a slam poetry recitation and you're just going to see like it's just jerking off, really. Yeah. And then, go to a slam poetry recitation, then read Milton's Sonnet 18 on the late massacre in Piedmont, and you'll be able to tell the difference. One of them is like some guy just throwing together some shit that like occasionally rhymes, and the other is a masterclass in the sonnet form. But to give an example, like to give an example of constraint in art that's a little bit more modern than Milton, because we like to talk about like more modern shit on here on Culture Dads. And I'll move into the music domain for a second. Take the band King Crimson, which is one of my favorites. I'm not a huge prog guy, but I love King Crimson. Here's a band that had a bunch of different lineups, and they all revolved around like one guy, the guitar player. He was like the only guy that was like consistent throughout the entire band's life. So in the early 80s, he totally reformed the band, and he drafted this drummer named Bill Bruford from Yes, who was an accomplished drummer. Yeah. And Fripp, the guitar player, insisted that Bill Bruford get rid of his hi-hat. Why did he do that? I don't know. Nobody knows. But when he did that, something very interesting happened. Bruford had to completely reinvent his drumming style. right? He was like used to leaning on the hi-hat. I think most drummers really do. Like, if you listen to, like, you know, not a fucking bar goes by where that thing doesn't get hit. And the result of him just getting rid of the hi-hat and doing a slightly more electronic drum setup than he was used to was some of the most interesting, but somehow also danceable music of the 20th century. It was completely revolutionized his playing style. So just changing something, throwing out one little thing, adding one little constraint to his artistic expression completely transformed it. And if you have no constraints, as you don't in prose, then, or at least if you don't have any prosodic constraints, as you don't in prose, then it's a free-for-all, and it's just going to be less artful. So that's an important aspect of poetry that is that I think is superior to prose. There's others as well, but do you guys want to weigh in on this at all first?
Yeah, I would say that now I'm going to pass it to Taerus. I want to hear what he thinks about this. But constraint is something that you could equate to like tradition, right? When you have constraint upon your art, you have a duty to follow a tradition, even if it's maybe not some ancient tradition going back. Maybe it's just a tradition that you came up with. This is constraints. These are the boundaries from which you are allowed to operate. These are the formulas that you must follow. These are the ritual rights that you must follow. And when you follow them, you end up with something that is beautiful, right? Beauty comes out of these types of traditions. Now, the reason that postmodernists have really just deconstructed that and they got into free verse and all this other kind of goofy stuff is because they view tradition as oppression, right? They want to liberate themselves from nature. They want to liberate themselves from tradition. They want this complete full individualist autonomy, and they are here to deconstruct and mock and reduce everything down to to get rid of it, to deconstruct everything so they can be, free little spirits or whatever. But what happens in this without that tradition is you get crap, right? You end up now, like you said, I've heard free verse that is cool, right? Something that is good is good. Good is good across the board. Somebody that's really talented and smart and a good creator can pretty much go into anywhere and create something good. That's just the way that it is. However, the medium of free verse, the without the constraints, and pretty much any art form that lacks any type of tradition, it does not consistently create beauty. It doesn't consistently create things that are of interesting quality, of innovative quality, and or anything that has immortality. It's nothing that's going to last, right? You mentioned T.S. Eliot and Robert Frost and these guys, and Edgar Allan Poe, and we go back to like all of the poets from yesteryear that had strict constraints, right? They used meters. They had, especially you're talking to T.S. Eliot, Robert Frost, Ezra Pound, like those modernist guys. There's a lot of times they were using as few words as possible, right? They had a lot of constraints upon them. A little bit less so in the guys beforehand because they had kind of this ornateness about their poetry and were a little bit more liberal with the amount of syllables and everything. That's all beside the point. But so that's the like postmodernists really viewed constraints and meters and all of these kinds of things in poetry and art period as like a form of oppression. They just innately want to reject it, but their doom for doing so is that none of them will be remembered. Mr. Taerus, what do you think about my take there?
Yeah, I agree, and I think in a purely practical sense, even these constraints of rhythm and rhyme and meter, it originated as a way of memorizing something for the sake of performance. But there is these limits that you place on yourself when you're writing. They force you to think creatively. if I was just going to sit in front of a blank page and just write whatever I want, I would never be happy with the result. Whereas, so when I was writing Song of Berlin, I would type up what I wanted to happen in the story, and then I would take that and convert it into verse. I would rework it and add rhythm and rhyme and find ways of expressing the same or something better using these limitations. And I can only compare it to, so writing it was one thing. It was good fun to figure out what I wanted to happen. Oh, that'll happen. That works. But getting it to fit into rhythm and rhyme perfectly, it's like striking a target.
Mm.
It's so much more artful than just, I don't know, there is something elegant about these constraints. And the idea that you don't need them, well, again, no one is going to remember slam poetry in 5 years' time, let alone 2000.
Yeah, the art suffers for it when there's no constraints, and you feel the mathematical beauty of it. Like, I think mathematical is not the right word, but the formal beauty of it when something just comes into alignment, when something falls into place.
Exactly.
It just there's a beauty there that really can't be replicated in prose. I mean, sometimes it can come close. I think Cormac McCarthy has some very lyrical passages. He's probably my favorite prose writer of the modern era. But it's not the same when you don't have the meter and the rhyme and the formalism, right? But I think it's also important to sort of underline what you said there, Dave, as well, about tradition. The simple fact of just conforming to a set of arbitrary conventions, quote unquote arbitrary, is what puts you into a tradition. And I think this is the key aspect of poetry, really. It's the one that makes it such a perfect vehicle for acting as a storehouse of our deepest stories and our myths and everything that we stand for, which is part of why I think it's so good that Taerus, your book has been written in verse. The set of conventions, conforming to the conventions, does something very similar to ritual, and I think that was a good observation. By performing the same steps, by sort of treading over the same ground, the same metrical ground, you are putting yourself in communion with the entire Western tradition, going back to, well, I mean, it depends on the form, right? If it's the ballad, then you kind of call upon the power of that nameless bard who sang, the ballad of Sir Patrick Spens, and the auditory effect is going to call to mind certain things. Like a ballad just sounds like the Middle Ages, right, or the late Middle Ages. Alliterative verse is going to have another effect, right? You're gonna put yourself into communion with the Germanic root of the English language, and this will call to mind other things. We've got some examples. We're going to read out some examples later on in the episode of these forms and everything. But the associations, the relationships, and just the traditions of prose, while they are venerable, they're not as deep as poetry. Like even Shakespeare, who did both, he put his more elevated and profound speeches into verse form. Generally, when he busts out the blank verse, that's when you get the important speeches, right? Because poetry is really the language of the gods, and prose, I think, is the language of men. So each has its place, but poetry just kind of has that primacy, that sort of it's what's at the root stock of who we are as peoples.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So let's Mr. Taerus or maybe Mr. Mike, whoever has it pulled up, I would like to hear an excerpt from the Song of Berlin. Is there any way we could pull that up?
It's a big book. I'd have to pick very carefully where
I probably should have asked beforehand. But all right, well, Mr. Taerus, do you have another shorter poem that you? I want to hear some poem. I love poetry. I'm a big fan. You know what I mean? I just love to hear it. So if you have something that you could pull up real quick, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I'll try and find something. If Mike wants to go first, I'll go through and find a passage.
No problem. I mean, I pulled up a poem that I wrote like many years ago. And it's a little bit long, so I don't know, like if that means that I shouldn't go first or whatever. But what it is here is basically, so the form, the content, you'll just hear what it is. But the form is actually a form that I developed myself. It's like an iambic trimeter. Each stanza is 4 lines long, and each stanza has like kind of like, again, constraints. Like, I can't remember what they all are now because it's been many years since I wrote it, but I believe it's each stanza has to have a rhyme, at least one rhyme, and each stanza has to have at least one alliteration. So yeah, I'll read it out, and Taerus, you go dig through your stuff here. Hopefully it's so this is actually a narrative poem. So hopefully it'll be clear what it's actually about. My earliest memory perhaps was of a book of myths, of deeds of heroes, of times when heavens shook with the rage of Zeus, the earth with fell Poseidon's wrath, Troy's walls with Achilles' anger loosed. A time out of mind, the distant past, which, weak as men are now, no doubt resists an honest appraisal, a memory in words alone. In time, this book would fade from mind, a third of life unfolding with such mundane cares as work, standing, wealth, minutia all. Those myths, a clouded memory, soon shirked in favor of childish things, yet stamped indelibly upon the man's psyche. And in my worldly wanderings, I forgot my home, fair Ithaca, with rocky spires that tower and foam, that lashes cliffs who frown above earth shaker's wide domain. From you, my home, I strayed abroad, and eyed the distant shores of Troy, whose alien sun arose to eastward mark my claim to win undying fame. From you, O Grecian winds and heroes great, I strayed abroad to wallow in the mire of latter days. From you, my love, I set with bellied sails to leave the world of virtue all astern, and heed the call of consequence, or worse, of rule. And fortune tossed, our amnesiac foundered on a witch's isle. The daughter of fair Helios bound him fast, enchanting him with wiles irresistible, and he, so predictable, mollified by drink, could not but run aground. And in his stupor he, foregoing memory, broke bread with those who live a waking sleep upon the lotus flower. All thought of home had left him, his body, mind of power bereft, our wanderer lay anesthetized and numb, his thought far from the days he roamed his native lands. For long he tarried thus, and feasted on the witch's store, till the surplus of lotus dwindled from his host's inertia. All this time good Pallas, slow to anger, sure of wisdom, void of malice, bestowed upon him no lack of signs. In those long years, Homerless and dulled to things beyond the sphere of the prosaic, still he heard the clarion call of those who went before. Said they, Achilles' heel, even Paris could waylay. The face that launched 1,000 ships, who rue the day that Ares threw the golden apple into the fray. The Trojan horse, a wicked stratagem arrayed as gift, the Cyclops, son of ocean, father of woe. And yes, Ulysses' bow, that latter generations lift with weakened hands but cannot string. The siren song, that tempting lay immortals sing, while man himself stands high aloft. Calypso, whose renown precedes her name, and Scylla and Charybdis, whom our hero must choose between proverbial rock and hard place. All these things, these epigrams, these stock phrases, all redound within the dim confines of memory, until our man at length decides to return once again. Some blind seer leads me hither in my maturity, to some old tale that sages call the Odyssey. At once, familiar memories flood like rivers spilled over their banks and fill my heart with awe and dread, that signal broth that myth alone can brew. At this I asked my sire if it were not perhaps a dream, that book of old, my home in elder words and elder worlds, and he but smiled and handed me a tome. What, this? To my surprise, though hundred times Apollo drove his blazing chariot round, the eyes of a child still blaze alight when met with treasure old. The span between remotest past and now is quite as nothing in the face of memory. For the elder man, again his son stood there, still ever young, wide-eyed and innocent. The young man too no less regained himself, content as he had been to put such childish things away. And so remembrance, back it turns upon the past, and leads to homecoming.
Is that the
So
end?
I don't know. That's it. I don't know if that was clear what was going on there in that story or whatever. But,
yeah, you're talking about it. You're talking about the Odyssey and like the importance of it, and then kind of like it's like, yeah, I completely got it. I thought that was dope, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's using the mythology to express this longing for a return to these glorious and ancient times, and I really love using myth to tell, to express something, which is what they were initially for in the first place.
Yeah, well, thank you for indulging me. I know it was a bit long there, but yeah, it was basically the narrative arc of the poem was that I had this book when I was a kid of myths and legends, and the Odyssey was part of that. And then I kind of forgot about it, and I kind of just wandered away from myth and like these things, right? And then at some stage, I asked my dad. I said to him, I used to have this book, didn't I? And he's like, oh, I don't know, maybe. And then next time I saw him, because, I haven't, we live hemispheres apart now. He handed me this book and he's like, hey, was this what you're talking about? And I was like, holy shit, it's the same fucking book, right? Because it was like long out of print and like I just had no idea what it was called or like what it looked like or anything like that. I was like, holy shit, it's the same fucking book. Anyway, that was what was going on in that poem, basically.
Excellent. Love it. Mr. Taerus, what do you got, bub?
I found one of my favorite passages from Song of Berlin, and again, it's in part of the narrative, but it shouldn't take too much setting up. So, the god Ares is a character called Jaeger, and the way that I've written the gods is that only the gods know that they're the gods. So it's never told to the reader, and it's never told to the heroes and the characters around them. But it's just like strange things seem to happen around them, and it's unclear whether I'm just being poetic or whether something supernatural has occurred. So I wanted to stride this very fine line between I didn't want it to be materialistic and stripped of the divine and the gods, but I also wanted the gods to be active participants. So Ares stumbles across a young soldier cowering in a trench, and he doesn't realize he's speaking to Ares, and he's lamenting the fact that he has god mituns on his belt, and he sees it as a cruel joke because God has abandoned them in the trench, and he doesn't realize he's talking to the god of war. And this is from Jaeger, the character Ares, motivating him to get back up and fight. Fool that you are, wretched boy, Jaeger barked out loud and clear. If there is a holy God, where else would he be but here? Where else do the brave arrive? At that apex all men seek, the highest glory to attain, the spirit and the soul at peak. War is triumph over death, each man slain before us now. Teuton, Saxon, Roman, Celt, each fulfills his sacred vow. Each of them embodies whole the very soul of our race, going beyond mortality, conquering and seizing fate, dedicated all to war, not tedium or fruitless games, but for the sake of his own blood, the Arias within his veins. Sacred is that crimson life through which he meets his transcendence, as it spills and soaks the soil, divine in veins of descendants. The same blood soaks each man here, either in a valiant death or in a mortal victory, won by those who still draw breath. For men whose souls are wrought by peace, what same glory can be said? Those poor men are fate to die in aged weakness in their beds. This battle won't discard your life. It frees you from where you were stuck. It is the culmination of every step you ever took. Everything you've ever done has led to where you stand right now. So will you just meekly submit or fight on with your head unbowed? A man's soul is measured here against his enemies in place, and just as he is measured up, so too is his warlike race. Here every man is at once an individual most great, beholder, craftsman of his life, artist, shaper of his fate, and yet more of a vital part of our collective in this time than he has ever yet been. Who can say that's not divine? Where gods dwell, their glory lies, and what corner of earth holds more than upon these battlefields wherein rages bloody war? Rise up, soldier, on your feet, put fear into these allied dogs. I shall give you gift of life and show you now where stand the gods. That's one of my favorite parts that I wrote. It's not. It precedes. It's just before like a big action sequence.
Now it's fucking based.
Thank you.
I'm like trying not to make noises and let you read. That got me all excited. I'm like all sweaty now.
Yeah. And a big thing for me was I wanted the characters to feel real. I wanted the guy cowering in the trench. He's like, he has his reasons. I didn't want to be completely one-sided and say there's no reason to ever be scared when you're being fired on by artillery. But I wanted this to address like actual concerns that obviously real soldiers have, and give them a rebuttal to that and say, well, this is the reality. But yeah, it's one part amongst many. So I'm looking forward to hearing what people think of the book.
I like that one line you talked about, the blood spilt on the soil or whatever. Like,
yeah, that stood out to me too.
That was awesome. And Mike, you had the one line. I don't know why, but you said something about like full-bellied sails or something like. And I'm a big fan of like word choice. You know what I mean? I love the sound of certain words. Maybe I don't know if there's anything to that or if that's a certain way, but I don't know what it is. Certain word choices and the sounds of words and everything, I think, is a huge part of poetry that kind of like gives it a certain feel, right? So yeah. I loved both your guys' poems. I thought they both were awesome.
Well, the beauty of poetry, like, you know, the sonic aspect of it, especially metered poetry, is that it kind of establishes this trance-like effect on the listener. I was getting that while Taerus was reading, because I think yours was a much more consistently metrical, but you only get this effect when you hear poetry, not when you read it, right? So the effect is kind of lost on us today, unless we're talking about like lyrics and music for the most part. It gives you this hypnotic effect, and it sort of opens you to suggestion and involvement in the poem in a way that straight prose doesn't. Like well done metered poetry, like we heard, has like this almost initiatic quality to it. Like you'll find as you listen that your mind kind of focuses and you become aware of like the nuances in the poetry, the word choices, and the wordplay jumps out at you. The internal rhyme kind of like and the double entendres just hit differently when you hear them out loud, and you kind of enter into this state of like open to suggestion, and like it's like a really skillful poet can make this quite an experience and can like fulfill with your expectations or fuck with you. And the meter sort of like, it just adds this dimension of involvement that you don't get without that metrical rhythmic quality. So with that, Dave, let's hear the one that you pulled up.
No, I got a bunch pulled up. So I'm pretty different than both you guys. I'm actually pretty different than pretty much all of the poets in the sphere, if you want to call me a poet, right? I am a fantasist. You know what I mean? I like to most of my poems are inspired from weird dreams that I have. I have weird dreams about spooky stuff, and then I wake up and I just like write a poem about them. And I believe very deeply in the importance of imagination. I believe in this. And the Greeks had a concept for this too. They called it oneiros, and there's plenty of other cultures that had ideas about this. But I think that there's this kind of higher divine reality of just like imagination and subconsciousness, or I don't even know what it is. I don't even think that it can be described. I think that there is this place, this kind of immaterial place of high weirdness where all like dreams and ideas and nightmares and everything, all of the above come from. It's just kind of like swirling chaos kind of place. And I believe that we have in modernity lost touch with this. And I think that the lack of imagination in people is an absolute crime. So I write a lot of my poetry. I talk about this place, and I call it the dream sea. And I just, that's a concept that is reoccurring in a lot of my art, in my prose, in my storytelling, in my poetry, et cetera, et cetera. And I just and I'll just read it to you. It's called Into the Dream Sea. Right. This is something I wrote this a few years ago. It goes. I've dreamt black thirst of vengeance, carried by hateful wings, to ebon moons of far-flung worlds where goatish devils sing. I've plunged jagged chasm voids that vomit molten earth, geysers belching bile bursts, steaming vile birth. I've thrusted sharpened blades into 1,000 breasts, relish every time I see the panicked eyes of death. I care not for the luxuries of song and silken feast. Gift me stampeding choired hate of 100 hungered beasts. Take me to the shaman's grove with hung corpses on display, frenzied dances, bloody rites, forgotten magic ways. Then pass me ghastly goblets, forged from wizards' bones. Let the elixir melt my mind as I sit on broken thrones. Teach me long-lost legends, scried on long-lost tombs, in the blood of slaughtered kings who met untimely dooms. Then I return to mundane world with maddened magic tales, and I write them down for others, for the dream sea they may sail. And
that's very interesting. That's very interesting and different. It's different than the two poems that were just read in a few ways. Taerus, before I launch into a big tirade about this, what were your impressions?
I really like this idea of like touching on concepts, and it's exploring these ideas. It makes you want to hear more about each individual idea, and that kind of combines to create this vast, like you say, like a dream sea. It's like this vast ocean, and you're staring out at it, and you don't know what to explore first. And it would be interesting to hear some of these stories more in depth.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, no, it definitely would. I mean, obviously, the first impression there is that there's a lot of Howard in that poem.
I'm a Howardian poet.
He's your boy. He's your boy, man. No, for sure. For sure. That's amazing. I love Howard's poetry. I actually think he was a better poet than a prose stylist. I know that's going to be a controversial take around here.
I think it's a good take.
I love it. Yeah, I think he's a great poet, and we included one of his poems in the Imperium anthology. I don't give a fuck what anybody says about that. He's a great poet. He deserves to be in there. So one of the things, like just from a structural point of view, that I found interesting is that whereas Taerus's and mine were something more like blank verse, I think actually yours, Taerus, might have been something closer to heroic couplets because you had end rhyme in yours. Yours, Dave, was a ballad form. I don't know if that was intended, but that's what you wrote. It's a 14 line, a 14 beat line or whatever. And it's interesting because, or it's like 8 and 7. Do I have that right? Whatever. 8 and 6. And at the end, at the end of every other line, you get like a little pause, right? And it sounds to me, it sounds kind of like, it sounds medieval. It sounds like old England, maybe not old English poetry, because that's alliterative. But this was the other aspect of it that I found interesting, is that it was a wonderful mix between a kind of ballad sounding prosodic effect and an old English, alliterative poem like Waldeer or Beowulf or something like that. So that was quite interesting. I like that. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
I don't know about you guys when you're writing in terms of rhythm, but I never pin down a specific rhythm. I find that the idea I'm trying to express, it ends up naturally lending itself to a certain rhythm, and I'm not even thinking about it when I write it. It just finds itself. I don't know if that was because the flow of your poem, Dave, was very natural. It felt like that kind of theme and those kinds of ideas couldn't really have been expressed in a different way, if that makes sense.
I don't count anything. I just kind of spit it out. And then afterwards, I'll go back and I'll trim or I'll do a little editing to try to make it fit a little bit better. But I don't do any counting. I don't even understand the different formats. I just know that there needs to be a format. You know what I mean? So, and that's poems actually a little bit different. Most of my poems are ABAB rhyme schemes. And then I'm a big fan of I like alliteration and doing tongue twisters and putting rhymes in rhymes, and I just love this. I love the sound of words. So that's just kind of what I go for. Like that one I say, I plunge jagged chasm voids that vomit molten earth, geysers belching bile burst, steaming bile birth. It's like I just try to rhyme and rhyme and rhyme. I don't know. I just like it.
Like that little stanza there's some interesting stuff going on without delving into the analysis of it. There's definitely there's some internal rhyme, there's some alliteration going on. It's in that ballad form or whatever. Now, before you read the next poem, I just want to read a couple stanzas from an ancient ballad called the Ballad of Sir Patrick Spens. And you'll hear what I mean. You'll be like, oh, it sounds kind of similar. And it's an old Scots poem, so my pronunciation is I'm just going to have to apologize for that in advance. The king sits in Dunfermline Town, drinking the blood-red wine. Oh, where can I get a skilly skipper to sail this new ship of mine? Oh, up and spak an eldrin nicht, sat at the king's richt knee. Sir Patrick Spens is the best sailor that ever sailed the sea. Our king has written a braid letter and sealed it with his hand, and sent it to Sir Patrick Spens was walking on the strand. To Norway, to Norway, to Norway o'er the fame. The king's daughter, O Norway, 'tis thou mun bring her home. So anyway, very old ballad poem.
I love that.
Isn't that great? It just the sound of it just sounds medieval, and it sounds kind of Germanic, quasi-Germanic, with the kind of French and Germanic anyway. And with the old Scots, if only I could pronounce it properly, it just has this wonderful effect and all of that. So that, when I heard you reading, I was just getting vibes of Sir Patrick Spens or the Trois Corbies or these old ballads. So, and this is what I'm talking about. This is what we were talking about before when we were saying that when you read a poem and it's in a meter and it just does these things, whether you intended naturally or whether it's intended, you're just always pulling on these strands that go way, way back into the distant past. And that's part of what gives your poetry that power. When you hear that, or Taerus's, when you hear the sort of blank verse da 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 rhythm that it just sounds like ancient poetry, and it puts you into this mythic mindset. I think I've talked about this in a previous episode, where you sort of enter into it's almost like the characters are not so much characters as archetypes that are kind of interacting together. You're kind of pulling on all of these associations and traditions. So you're kind of leveraging them, and like they're lending your poem and your narrative weight. Anyway, I just, when I heard your poems, both of yours, I instantly, like, it just called to mind all these associations and everything like that. This is what poetry can do, especially when read out loud.
Hell yeah. Yeah, let's do another round. Mr. Taerus, you got another one pulled up?
Yes. So this one was inspired. I don't know if you know the historian, and he's kind of a historian and he writes books, Dan Davis. He had a video on Mycenaean mercenaries, and he had a line in it that stuck with me. He goes through historical ideas and he tells almost a story of what could have happened. And he had this line of the king brings his mercenaries wine for wounds that won't heal. And I thought wine for wounds that will not heal became the title of this, and I sort of riffed on that idea. The bards and poets sing their songs of battles sounding all too real. Their words run rivers over scars, bring wine for wounds that will not heal. Many foemen swift cut down, seen many a good man slain. Brothers taken by the sword, bring forth something for the pain. Home a distant memory, a lifetime spent away at war, pour into the drinking cup, alleviate the aches and sores. How many undeserving live, the cowards turned and fled disgraced. The thought alone is something vile, fetch something for the bitter taste. The bones that never healed right, the tendons still hang snapped within, but something arrives at the lips, let it loosen up the limbs. How many friends have fallen now, ending life in bravery. How few men have been left behind, toasting to their memories. The bards and poets sing their songs of battles sounding all too real. Their words run rivers over scars, bring wine for wounds that will not heal.
Is that the end? All right. That was excellent.
Thank you.
You guys got to say, say the end because it's like, I'm like waiting for more, right?
Yeah.
Man, that was dope. I'm like, oh, this is getting me all fired up.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was cool. That I like one of the things that was running through that, of course, that line, the title that you took from that Dan Davis, I don't know what it was, a video or whatever. It was like, that gives it the structure. I mean, yours had the meter as well. I think it was iambic quadrimeter perhaps, but anyway, that line is kind of the anchor around which the poem is constructed, or it's like the scaffolding around which the poem is constructed. And it just, it comes back. Was it 2 or 3 times? It came back a couple
twice,
of times. Yeah. It came back at the very end and near the beginning of the poem, and it just sort of like acts as that anchor point or whatever. But there was a lot of other wonderful imagery there of like, what it is to be a war veteran and to come back changed in war. And, you're not the man that you once were. And you've got this like limp now and you're somebody else. And, wounds that will not heal. Like I thought that was very poignant.
Yeah, I mean, the line initially, he was referring to it quite literally, where you have aches and pains and from a long life at war, and you're drinking wine to get rid of some of that. But I wanted to apply that also to mental wounds, because it's no secret that a lot of soldiers turn to drink when they come home. And I wanted to kind of express that it's a twofold. It's a twofold coping mechanism, I suppose, is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, that line, the wounds that would not heal, that was like, that like stabs you in your heart. That was good stuff. I really enjoyed that one.
Thank you. He also enjoyed it. He ended up seeing it and posted it, so that was nice.
Oh, nice.
Very bass. Mike, you got anything else dialed up?
I don't really have any. I could read a super short one of my own, but I was looking through my old poems, and there wasn't much. There wasn't much that I was happy with. I mean, I have a bunch of them. Let me see if I can get something here. I actually closed it.
You want me to read something while you find one?
That one's so fucking short. All the ones that I think are like halfway decent are like 1 stanza, 2 stanzas long.
Read one. Let's hear it. I like
Something
shorts.
All right. Let's see.
I like it all, boy.
Okay. All right. This one is called Poem on the Occasion of a Loved One's Death. The sun shines, but the day is dark. She searches, but finds not. The body is cold, but the tears are warm. It gets easier as I get older, but this is not progress. Is there pharmacon enough for my heart? Gone, but not forgotten. That's it.
That's sad, boy.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it just kind of came out one time, obviously. The key word there that is untranslated, pharmacon, is kind of like this Greek term that has a double meaning. It means drug, but it also it also means like it's something that's both good and bad, right? It's like it's I guess drug is a good translation, because drug can be something that heals you, but it can also be something that like you lean on as a crutch or whatever. I guess that one was pretty fucking short. Let me read another one. You talked about, Dave, about dreams, poetry from a dream. Here was a super short poem that I got from a dream. And now, I mean, I was a musician before I did any Imperium Press stuff. And a lot of times what would happen is I would wake up in the morning and I'd have a song running through my head. And it was like, I don't know where the hell it came from. It was just sort of dropped in my lap by the gods. And so I'd like get up and like run out of bed and like grab my guitar and start transcribing it before it flew away, which it always would within about 30 seconds. So I did the same thing with a poem one time. And it's called From a Dream. Then enter the warrior functionary, the myth of blood on his hands. Bitter, bitter muttering. And that's it. So, I don't know what the fuck it means. I have no fucking idea what that's all about.
I really think short poetry doesn't get enough credit. I really like these very succinct thoughts and points that you're not trying to over say something. You're not repeating yourself. You're just, here's the idea, here's what it is. You're expressing it poetically, and that's it. You're not finding ways to say the same thing over and over and over again. And I really do like very succinct poems like that.
I do too. There's one in the I'm going to try and pull it up here. There's one in the anthology that's 2 lines long. It's even shorter than the one I just read. It's an Ezra Pound poem. It's called In a Station of the Metro. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. That's it. That's it, boy. It's just 2 fucking lines. That's one of his imagist poems. That was his earliest, like in the 19-teens. That was one of his earlier stages of his poetic development, and it was like it was very much influenced by Chinese poetry, where it's all about like condensed economy of expression, expressing what as much as possible with as little as possible, which in some sense is actually what poetry is really all about. It's it's about boiling down a thought or a sentiment that could be expressed in a paragraph and just like expressing it in 3 words or 7 words or something like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, anyway, I like short poems too. I think they're awesome.
Hell yeah. I guess all right, let me see here. I got 2 that are kind of, I do mostly like medium length stuff, like stuff that's like 5 to 8 stanzas probably.
You got nothing that's like 6 words long? Nothing?
Wait, I have one really short one here.
Dude, I don't want to throw you. Just read what you're going to read. That's just being an asshole.
I already just started scrolling here. Let me see. I might be able to. A lot of these poems I can recite, but I don't want to just like recite here. Oh man, I'm already scrolled. Where can I find this freaking thing? Hang on.
I'm sorry, I fucked you over there.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Oh, here we go. I found it. Okay. I wrote this one. I was just like walking through the woods in wintertime, and I was like, this is like kind of weird. I don't know. I just got this like haunting, weird vibe from like walking through the woods. It's literally just about the woods at wintertime. So it's called Winter Solemn. I say, the whispering northern breeze beckons haunting chill. At weeping stance the ash trees sway, lost in nightly still. Caress encircles flesh and coils around my spine. A lonely guest among nobles dressed, the frost upon the pines. And that's it.
That was great, dude.
Thanks, man.
It just instantly called to mind another poem in the anthology. It's got this November sort of like, wind whistling through the empty trees. The veil between the worlds is thin kind of feel to it. Does it not? That's what I got out of it. Yeah,
it was like, I'm from Pennsylvania, and we have some really dense forests here, and our winters are miserable. They're very cold. They're very wet. Pennsylvania isn't where you go live if you're trying to like live somewhere with nice weather. We have really brutal, humid summers and very cold, wet, miserable winters. And our forests are very dense and spooky. And there's actually quite a few like paranormal sightings. This is a Bigfoot hotspot. There's UFOs. Yeah. There's like all this weird cryptid stuff that goes on in the forests of PA. But when you go out into the woods of PA at night, there's like a spooky vibe to it. So I was just out in the woods one time during the winter time, and it has a spooky vibe. Hey, can I read this one I was going to read?
Sure.
Okay. So this one, I had this weird nightmare about the world coming to an end in a very weird way. I have a fascination with the color, with purple, the color purple. To me, it's like the color, I associate it with weirdness, right? When I picture some type of cosmic, like, I don't even know what some sort of cosmic horror thing. When I think of something that's high weirdness and bizarre and beyond comprehension, I always picture the color purple. I don't know why, but I had this nightmare one time about everything turning purple and like the world coming to an end. So I wrote this poem about it. It's called "The Coming Age of the Purple Moon." The sun sinks behind the crest, never to rise again. Blackness draped from east to west, last lights begin to wane. Men are racked with panicked fright, earth now a shadowed tomb. Begins the age of endless night in the ascending purple moon. Pallid glare of purple stare gleams in the moaning dark. Wailing whispers haunt the air, sanity is torn apart. Phantom forms swim sunless skies, sing songs with cadence foul. Maddened men's helpless cries, enchanted by the howls. Can no longer trust what is seen. What was there now is not. blurring senses, waking dream as psyche starts to rot. Enemies false perceived, memories wrong recalled, ghostly whispers, minds deceived, paranoia poisons all. A purple hell, the oceans swell, rivers are reversed, time is torn and tales will tell of earth and cosmic curse. From oldest depths of ground and sea, ghastly structures stab the skies. Geometry of blasphemy cause bleeding human eyes. Titanic ebon gates cast wide, they take many winged flight. Over this realm they now preside, their kingdom of purple night. End.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, dude, that was like it. There was a lot going on there, imagery wise. It called to mind the black sun of Eddie mythic, the Germanic mythic complex. The purple moon, it just like instantly called that to mind for me, which has always been a very weird kind of piece of imagery. You know what I mean? It's just very uncanny, and I could not shake the feeling throughout the reading of that poem. It just reminded me of this book called House on the Borderland by William Hope Hodgson.
Oh yeah, I know that. I read that one, and okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, it's been so long since I've read it. It's been years, so I don't remember a lot of the particularities of that. But I just remember, I think that in this book, there's like, it's just like there's unending night. Like I think that there's something that happens in the book that like inaugurates that, and you get the same. Like I just kept picturing the same landscape, the same like doomed, dim landscape that I was picturing when I was reading that book or whatever. So it's interesting. Yeah, this I'm sure wasn't something that you intended, but again, the imagery and the sort of like poetic associations just are pulling on all these strands that sort of like go back to like older authors and like older, imagery from like people gone before us or whatever. And that one definitely, yeah, that was a very strong vibe that I got from it. You should publish that book too, bro. It's so fucking good. That was like one of my favorites from way back in the day.
Oh yeah, I have been looking into William Hope Hodgson. We're actually looking at. I was going to publish The Nightland, but it's a very good read. But there's like a distilled version called The Dreams of X or something like that I wanted to publish, but that's still under copyright. We're gonna have some Hodgson coming out. Hodgson is excellent.
He died in 1918, so I believe he's free and clear. Anyway,
excellent.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I'm a little bit, like I said, I'm a little bit different. I'm like a fantasist where a lot of guys in our circles are either modern type poets, or they're like very strongly mythopoetic, right? Arthur Powell comes to mind. He has a lot of mythopoetic themes and everything. If you read what's Horizons of Iron, by Imperium Press. And
I've heard of this book.
Yeah. So I'm probably the only like weird poet, the only guy that does fantasism. But hey, that's what comes out of my brain.
Well, for me, it passes the ultimate test of poetry, which is, could you recount this to a bunch of Bronze Age warriors and keep their attention? Because that's what classical poetry was for. Mm-hmm. It was for warriors to be like, I hate to use the term, but I've said it's similar to the action movies of the day. They're not supposed to be for pencil-necked university lecturers to trawl over and squeeze all the joy from. They're supposed to be entertaining. It's supposed to be something that warriors can sit around and go, I've done something like that. That sounds great, and want to hear more of it.
Yeah.
This is something Dave and I have talked about quite a lot on Culture Dads, which is that art is supposed to be entertaining. It's not supposed to be a fucking snooze, right? Like
Yeah,
Homer is something like as maybe the paradigm of epic poetry. Homer is something that we don't really have a cultural analog to anymore. He's kind of like too big for anything that we've had like since him, or well, I don't know if you could really say that, like, vis-a-vis the Eddas or whatever, but certainly for a long time, because what Homer is, and I think, as well, you could say this about like Beowulf and Germanic poetry, maybe not Beowulf, but like the Eddas and like the mythic poems in the Germanic myths, is something like we don't have anything like that. We haven't had anything like that for a long time. It's kind of like, Homer to the Greeks was kind of like the Bible, plus like MMA, plus NFL, plus like the Metropolitan Opera, all rolled into one. We don't really have anything like that anymore, right? Like it's this high art, but it's also just gets your blood pumping, and it's also has religious dimensions that are important and sacredness to it that's inviolable and things. So like we don't have anything like that kind of anymore. I mean, and we haven't for a very long time. Anything that ticks all those boxes. We certainly do have, we've got all those things, but not kind of all rolled up into like one thing.
Yeah.
And this is what art is meant to be. It's meant to do that. Like, and I think that's a good, Taerus, what you said about, the test. Can it entertain a bunch of like Bronze Age, like warrior chieftains? If it can't do that, it ain't shit. I'm sorry. It just isn't. It's
like, would I be embarrassed recounting this in front of a bunch of Bronze Age warriors? If I wouldn't dare read it to them, I'm not going to bother. It's not art is, as you say, it's very high art, but it's very adrenaline fueled. But I think that comes down to taste of the kind of people demanding that kind of stuff. In the Bronze Age, you had these warrior chieftains who demanded high art. It wasn't separate from their desire to go into battle. It was another expression of that, because through art, their deeds were immortalized.
Exactly. That was like almost the point of going into battle, is that some bard would sing your praises when you died, which you were probably going to do when you went, right? Like the importance of the bard cannot be overstressed, right? Like Horace has this line that's so great, and it goes, "Many heroes there were before Agamemnon, but they are lost in unending night because they lacked a bard." Right? It underscores the importance of the bard to these people. And this is something, because like, the right, the nationalists, whatever it is that we call ourselves, are really trying to rebuild a warrior culture of some kind or another, whether we're Christians or pagans or, Nietzscheans or whatever we are. We all want to rebuild this like cultured thug, robust manliness, like a masculine culture. We want to recapture that, because obviously our world is in the shape it's in because it's been lost. And one of the ways that not one of the ways, one of the sine qua non, one of the like things that is going to be required that you can't do without in order to build that warrior culture is this kind of praise poetry. They call it apodeictic poetry. You sing the deeds of the ancestors, the songs of great men, these family sagas. In a healthy society, like, honor and shame count for everything. And the poet, the warrior poet, the bard, is the main source of your undying fame, right? Like in this honor culture, honor and shame are everything. Your moral standing has nothing to do with your little choosies or your feelings or your self-esteem or whatever the fuck. Your self-esteem is just the esteem of your peers, right? So this is the importance of the bard. This is the importance of the man who sings your praises so that you are not lost in unending night, as Horace says. And like we need this. Like, this is something that that we really don't have. And like, there's no sign of it either in the dissident right or whatever you want to call it. But we need it, right? Like, and this is part of the reason why poetry is so, so important.
Yeah, and it also plays into our strengths and our limitations, because we're never going to make movies. As much as we do, I'm sure many people, including myself, would love to make a film about something and show this. It's like, we're never going to have the budget for that, at least not in our lifetimes, for some multi-million-dollar mega action movie prospects. Whereas poetry, you don't have budget constraints in writing. You can tell a fantastic story that maybe, 2 or 3 generations down the line, one of your descendants or someone keeping the flame of what we do alike can then go, oh, I now have the budget to make this into something. So it doesn't take money. It just takes talent and effort to be able to set up a legacy that somebody else can take up and run with.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Taerus, let me ask you, why do you think, and this is something that I also, like, in our spheres, I've run into, people just are like disinterested in poetry. It seems like the moment that it starts to rhyme, people are like, oh, they kind of check out. Not everybody, and I think a lot of guys are coming around to it, but why do you think that is?
I think it's just the reputation that poetry has, unfortunately, because of slam poets and all these postmodernists. It's no longer an art form to immortalize deeds. It's emo kids with eyeliner crying about their ex-girlfriend and slitting their wrists. It's had the masculinity ripped out of it. And I think generally when people hear rhyme, they've almost been, it's like Pavlov's dog. They're just instinctively going, oh, this is going to be some gay bullshit about how, I don't know, his grandmother died and his girlfriend broke up with him. It's not something that they can really get behind, and of course expressive poetry has its place, but it needs to have a spark. It needs to have something that grabs somebody. It's like I said about could you recount this to Bronze Age warlords? And for me, if we're going to be emulating this warrior culture, we have to take what they made and try and not necessarily recreate it, but take what they made and do our own thing with it that suits our needs and our purposes. Whereas all this crying, it's really frustrating. It's very difficult to put into words. Yeah. But it's akin to people swearing off painting and rolling their eyes at painting because of modern art. It's you wouldn't do that. It's the same medium, but it's not doing the same thing. It's not expressing the same thing. I couldn't see how just because this person's rhyming, it makes what he's saying irrelevant. If anything, it's easier to memorize and it sticks in the mind more.
I think there's another aspect to it as well, where, like, I mean, there definitely is an associative aspect of it, and I think that comes with, as you say, it comes with the fact that basically all poetry today is lyric poetry, right? Like it's like musical lyrics especially, right? And this is kind of, it has an association as a folk art form, like a folk poetic form when it rhymes. It kind of feels, I think, to people like low culture. And now I wouldn't denigrate, like, quote unquote low culture or the culture of the folk, because this is sort of the soil out of which high culture grows. But it definitely kind of has that kind of, I think rhymed poetry, it sort of has that association. Although, like, rhymed poetry can of course be very elevated and was for a long, long time. But like even Milton said something, even John Milton, one of the foremost poets in the English language, kind of said the same thing about rhymed poetry. He kind of didn't like it. He wrote sonnets, he did some rhymed poetry, but like his heart was sort of in the blank verse, in non-rhyming poetry. But So I think it has an association, but all of these forms, all of these prosodic elements have associations. Like there's a poem that I want to read a little bit of here. Sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
But I just want to read a little bit of it. We can't read too much because it's under copyright. I don't want to get jerked around. It's an alliterative. It's an alliterative poetic form, and it's just about trash. But listen to what it sounds like. Listen to what it like calls to mind. Just the poetic form. It's called Junk by Richard Wilbur. An axe angles from my neighbor's ash can. It is hell's handiwork, the wood not hickory, the flow of the grain not faithfully followed. The shivered shaft rises from a shell heap of plastic playthings, paper plates, and the sheer shards of shattered tumblers that were not annealed for the time needful. At the same curbside, a cast-off cabinet of wavily warped unseasoned wood waits to be trundled in the trash man's truck. Now, it goes on for a while, but it kind of goes on in the same way. But
Alliterative.
It's alliterative poetry, right? And it's not metered in the same way, whereas, like, you know, the traditional like English alliterative poetic form it's all half lines, and there's usually one or two alliterations in like one of the halves, and then the same syllable alliterated or the same consonant alliterated in one of the other halves. So you get like, what was it? An axe angles, and then from my neighbor's ash can, right? So that would be one line, and that's the alliteration. And it doesn't have a set number of feet or anything. So you can have like a bunch of syllables in between all the A's or whatever, and it still works. But it's interesting because like this poem's interesting because, you know, it's about junk, obviously. But it sounds kind of elevated, doesn't it? It kind of sounds like an old, like Germanic, like Beowulf type poem or Waldir or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's got this like kind of incongruous, like weird tension because of like the subject matter and the form are just like totally at odds. But I think it's interesting that the form just has this effect. Like when we hear alliterative poetry, it just kind of like sounds. It just sounds like, you know, Saxon, like warrior poets, and it just sounds amazing. I just love alliterative poetry.
Yeah.
It just has that feel to it or whatever. So yeah, it's different types of poetry call to mind different things. End rhyme calls to mind one thing. You know, dactylic hexameter calls to mind another, although that's a little less familiar in English. Alliterative poetry calls to mind yet another, a ballad, another thing. The form really matters. And this is what poetry kind of has that prose kind of doesn't.
It almost sounded a little bit onomatopoeic with the reliance on like the sh sound. It almost sounds like a pile of rubbish collapsing. Another thing being thrown on the pile and it rolls down to the bottom. And I noticed that as well in Dave's poem, where I think it was bubbling bile, where you're talking about, and it sounds like a pot of something boiling and bubbling over. And I think that you can use rhythm and the sounds of words to immerse the reader in that kind of, in the picture of it. Something I do in Song of Berlin, where I try to have the almost staccato bursts of words to mimic the sound of a machine gun being fired in bursts.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's an underrated thing, and it's not even something you're necessarily doing on purpose, but it's something that you're expressing the idea with onomatopoeia, which is, I think that it's looked down on when you're using it very simply, like just the word bang or something. But there are ways to use that as in that poem where it does elevate it and it immerses you in the theme.
Yeah. Like I said before, the sound of words to me is huge, right? Here's a stanza from a Robert E. Howard poem. Howard was just brilliant with this. Like, just like using certain vowel sounds to give this like big crushing kind of. It's almost like how Tony Iommi would like track his guitars over and over again, and instead of playing it on the like playing certain power chords on the 4 and 5 string, he would play it up towards the 12th fret on the top 2 strings, right? So this is kind of like what just give this sound this thickness. He has this one. This is from a stanza from a poem he writes called "Song of the Werewolf Folk," which is just a poem about like werewolves, right? Which is fucking dope. So he goes, slink where the Titan boulders poise and the chasms grind thereunder, over the mountains black and bare in the teeth of the brooding thunder. Like that he uses that U sound, that thunder thereunder. You know what I mean? Wonder. He like uses that a lot into the, you know, like he uses BL, like words that start with BL a lot, black and bare, and you know, a lot. He uses, and just he makes with this like soundscape that in itself just like lends oomph to the stuff and makes it sound thick and big and huge and like dinosaurs walking around or something. And maybe I'm thinking too much into it, but I love that. I love people that put that kind of stuff into their art, into their poetry. It's not just what the words say. It's not the content matter. It's also how it sounds, right? So that's just something that maybe it's because I mean, like you guys, I'm a musician, and sometimes I will listen to songs that maybe aren't that great because the guitar tone sounds awesome. You know what I mean? Just the tone and the sound of it is really cool. And another thing I was going to say earlier is there's this thing in modernity where if you go too hard or you try too hard or if you're too whatever, it comes off like, I guess I don't even know. The way that people read poetry has no performance now. I have been to poetry readings and almost all of them just like kind of like look at the paper and look down at the ground and they kind of just read it like this and it's very monotone. And it's like, that's not how poetry's supposed to be read. You're supposed to put on a performance, motherfucker. You know what I mean? Entertain me. You wave your arms, use a voice. And I do this. I can't. I maybe it's because I started with music and because I love performance and I love this. When I read a poem, I recite a poem, I wave my hands and I'll do a voice and like I just can't help it. I don't do it on purpose. Sometimes I'll start out trying to read it more casual and I just get thrusted into it because I'm like drunk with this feel of this ecstasy of entertaining, right? And especially if I'm getting this kind of like feedback. And so here's this is what comes to mind. I love to read poetry to people, right? I just to see how they react because it's kind of like a social experiment to me. And usually people that say they like poetry, this comes to mind. I was at like a thing and I read poetry to these guys. There's a guy and a few girls that said they like poetry, and they're like, "Why do you read it like that?" They asked me, "Why do you read it like that?" And I was like, and then in contrast, one time I was at the gym and there's just like a bunch of like dumb bros, and they're like, "Oh, you write poetry?" I was like, "Yeah, can I read you something?" They're like, "Yeah, go ahead." So I read poetry to these dudes in the sauna, right? And they fucking loved it. They're like, "Yo, that went hard, bro. That went hard, dude."
Nice.
Like they probably don't even understand half the words that are in the shit, but they just innately got excited about it. They're like, "Yeah, bro." One guy's like, "Bro, that was like fucking bars, dude." Like, it's like
that's interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just gonna say it's interesting, like the crossover with hip hop and everything like that. You know, we did our hip hop episode. Dave, do you have that Howard stanza that you read? Do you have it handy? Can you read that again just for a sec?
You're not gonna beatbox on me, are you?
No.
Okay, well, let me pull it up. Well, he goes, it's actually kind of a shorter poem. I can just read the whole thing real quick.
Sure.
It's called Song of the Werewolf Folk. Slink white fangs in the throat of life, lap up the red that gushes, in the cold dark gloom of the bare black stones, in the gorge where the black wind rushes. Slink where the Titan boulders poise and the chasms grind thereunder, over the mountains black and bare in the teeth of the brooding thunder. Why should we wish for fertile fields, valley and crystal fountain? This is our doom, the hunger trail, the wolf in the storm-stalked mountains. Over us stalk the bellowing gods, where the dusk and the twilight sever. Under their iron goatish hooves they crunch our skulls forever. Mercy and hope and pity all, bubbles the black crag sunder. Hunger is all the gods have left, and the death that lurks thereunder. Glut mad fangs in the blood of life to slake the thirst past sating, before the blind worms mouth our bones and the vulture's beak is grating. End.
Hell yeah. No, like what I picked up from that when you read it before, and you mentioned this as well, was the sort of repetition of the vowel sounds. Sunder, hunger, thereunder, and it wasn't just in the end rhyme. It was like throughout, like, you know, a stanza or whatever. And this is the technical term for this, I believe, is assonance. It's sort of like what the vowel version of alliteration. And the reason why I brought this up in the context of hip hop is that a lot of times some of the best hip hop bars are doing this. A lot of them are using this assonance throughout the, like, you know, the bar or whatever. One of them, I'm just going to read this. I'm not going to attempt to, like, you know, spit a verse or whatever, but I'm just going to read it off as though it's like, you know, I'm reading from a page or whatever. This, a few bars from this song called Earl by Earl Sweatshirt. It says, I'm a hot and bothered astronaut crashing while jacking off to buffering vids of Asheroth eating applesauce, sent to Earth to poke Catholics in the ass with saws and knock blunt ashes into their caskets and then laugh it off. You can hear it's like the ah, it's just going on and on and on, crashing while jacking off, you know, Catholics in the ass with saws. Yeah, ashes in their caskets and laugh it off. You know what I mean? Like it just keeps going. Like this assonance, the just keeps going. And then later on he goes, what is it? Before I suck it up, but hurry, I got nuts to bust and bust the fucking ups to shut and sluts to fucking uppercut. Like you can hear the assonance going on there, right? Like it's using real, like it's funny shit, but it's like he's also using real poetic, like genuine poetic techniques, you know? That's great.
That was very funny. Yeah.
All I can think of at the minute is trying to like transpose that into something more classical. It's like, sing, O muses, of a man with a nut to bust.
Sluts to fucking uppercut. But yeah, no, and here's the thing though, is like in the best hip hop, like actual like genuine poetic forms are being used. Like the guys just listen to that and be like, yo, that was fucking dope. But like they kind of, the reason why they think it's dope is because it's doing the same shit that like people have been doing for centuries, right? With the assonance and the alliteration and all that shit, right? So it's important. Like I'm sure he didn't sit down and be like, okay, well, I'm just going to use these syllables or these vowels, but he's just doing that naturally, right? Like Atellus, like what you were saying before about how when you get into it and you're going with the flow of the poetry, you don't even have to think about the meter. You don't even have to think about the form. It just sort of rolls off the tongue naturally. But that's, yeah. It's just like, I think like the most successful, like modern poetry and song lyrics are doing a lot of the same shit that like poets have been doing forever.
Hell yeah, absolutely. Well, like, especially you're talking like in the realm of like hip hop, the older guys were like this, right? Because you got a lot of these older guys were reading poetry. You know, nowadays it's just like fuck garbage. You know, what I mean, I can't even like listen to it. It's not on the same level. But
it's like if you listen to like, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I forgot what I was gonna say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, if you listen to like a Guru or a Rakim or like a really talented lyricist or Jizza from back in the day or something like that, they're doing a lot of the same shit, right? Like they're doing the internal rhyme schemes. They're probably not paying very close attention to like, you know, metrical forms or like feet and iambs and dactyls and things like that. But it's just coming off naturally, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, you get like obviously the form, which was never really an elevated form, has degraded even, you know, from where it started. And, you know, we get into like mumble rap and all the kind of like bullshit and everything like that. But, you know, the most successful examples of the form are using these techniques.
Hell yeah. Taerus, you got another ditty for us?
I can certainly find one.
Yeah, let's hear some more, boy.
So I've got, continuing off your theme of poems written from dreams, I've got two. One of them's quite long. It's because it's quite alliterative, so you might like this one. It's called World Eater, and it came to me in a dream. Njot Njorun, Night Queen, deliverer from depths of dwarven Draugr halls, Svartalfheim, scarcely seen by song-bearing skalds. Beneath thy black shroud cloak, from dream-weaving Wotan did word come, images ingrained flashing in the mind, so did the mead master show me wisdom. Flocks of men were but herds, moving through cold concrete pastures grimly grown. Countless knocking shoulders came against one another, though not one noticed, for none had known. So aimlessly wandering as they were, to some fool's gold gathering liar's lair, returning to oft-repeated route, thoughtful steps bid them on paths to nowhere. How they have forgotten of Trito, first amongst heroes, of Heracles and Hydra, how bold Beowulf fought, or swift Sigismund, sword-hand slayer of serpents, death-dealing to dragons doom wrought. How they forgot the magnificent maxim of the Shining One by whom's arrows Python fell, inscribed, enshrined in Grickland, wherein Miklagard dwells. Know thyself. Masterless men, slaves to survival, vassals of venomous vice, it was their footsteps that strode the serpent's spine, that dweller within the far-flung ice. The steps shook the earth as the wide world snake in tandem rose from the depths of Midgard, entwined with how the feet of men flowed. I first thought they had summoned the great Jormungandr, spawned to shake the earth, bid him bring by biting jaws, readying Ragnarok, realizing that red rebirth, or that their countless footsteps had woken him from such centuries of cyclical slumber. Awoken, we await his awe-filling form. He emerges ever-flowing and endless, the lay of land from its mantle moved, terrain thus torn. From the all-encompassing earthen deep, envisioning and encircling it, with ravenous rattle and in eternal recurrence calling forth the thunderer to do terrible battle, that the swift striker might see the savage serpent, sent back to his depths with horrid harm, slain or sent into servitude by the mighty master of men-at-arms. Then I thought on what I had observed might instead be the inverse, that the world eater's awoken state was rendering man's woes ever worse, and had brought about this affliction in the animated, empty-minded mass of men who had come, that they were puppets, simple upon the snaking strings of that serpent, marionettes made to march to his movements, to dance to his dark drums. But then, as arrows of the gods, did my revelation come rapid without relent, striking me deep and bidding my eyes see that sight they had sent. So did that herd of wane-spirited men weakly walk, without joy, without sorrow, without terror or shame, the endless, aimless steps of soulless men and the ground-shaking serpent were one and the same. In the path upon which they so aimlessly tread, there I saw the serpent's spine. In their countless stomping feet I saw him, the earth rattler with their rhythm entwined. The masses of mindless men, self-mastery so far removed, running-mouthed, made the serpents more terrible, gaping wide, holding the all-consuming darkness that might one day swallow all beneath the sun that meets not Fenrir's jaws. Though empty-eyed and no soul dwelt beneath their meaningless movements, spirit still animates all that is, even those which amble aimlessly unseeing, little more than ash from which they were long ago fashioned, and so it was with these beings. Their spirits congealed just as blood cast from veins, flowing forth upon a path to join a terrible mass, one that stared back into the souls of those few men who witness it, peering into a sight by bounds of petrifying far past. Thus did the eye of the all-devouring open, wide-eyed and rising from depths evermore, staring out from within the abyss, and through the empty eyes of men it saw. Within the body and mind of man is such a serpent and that thunderer, and in eternal recurrence shall he wield the striker's club, beat it back into the black depths earth's under. O striker, thundering one, thou and third, Trito, firstborn of heroes, be with me that I might wield thy weapon, bear thy club, and bathe in blood of that battered serpent when I bear down my blows. Upon the son of the earth encircler that inhabits my aching heart, I pray for strength, not salvation in desperate plea, that I might harness my weapon and emerge through thy thunder in victory.
Fuck yeah.
Oh, I love it. Oh.
It's quite a long one. I don't usually write ones that long, but...
got me all worked up, boy.
Yeah, bro.
Wow.
Now, there was a lot going on in that poem, like just image wise. Like there was some, obviously there was a lot of Germanic stuff. There was some classical things. There was like some Nietzschean things. There was even some like Proto-Indo-European stuff going on there too. That was a nice touch. No, that was amazing. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. The World Eaters, right? Oh man. That's a dope title too. That's like, I don't know. That just goes hard, bud.
Yeah.
All right. We're coming up. Can I do one more of mine?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Speaking of like coming from dreams, I actually wrote this like half asleep, and I don't even like really remember writing it. I had this horrible nightmare. This is like, it was absolutely just, I have these like really bizarre nightmares for some reason. I guess my brain produces too much DMT, or maybe I just like, I read too much weird shit and I just have weird, spooky, terrifying dreams. So I like had this weird dream. I was like sick as a dog. I had a fever going, and I had this bizarre fever dream that was just really weird. So I wrote this poem. I like woke up. I like typed this into my phone and then passed back out and barely even remember writing it. So it goes, it's called Replicant Form. This form unborn and replicant, with locking eyeless gaze, appendages emerging bent in uncanniest of ways. In caution I retreat my steps, it mirrors them in kind, while learning it appears inept, becomes flawless human mime. Its visage shines with nameless hues, it spasms then retracts, sprouting flesh and innards fuse into a human form intact. Jaws unhinged from rigid face, cast suboral droning screech, evolving into its pupil phase, its first attempts at speech. It crawled out of unworldly womb, from a realm we cannot see. Now it stands in this empty room, a more perfect form of me. End.
That's something. That was very different from any of the poems that we've heard so far in terms of the content. There was a definite sci-fi thing going on there. And that's not, you don't hear that very often. You don't hear poetry, you don't hear like sci-fi themes expressed in that. I don't know. Like you said that was like not something that you did consciously because it was like, half dreaming or whatever. But that, I don't know. That's what I got out of it. It definitely, like, it reminded me a little bit of like some of the stuff from the Bizarre Archives, to be honest, some of the sci-fi stuff that you've written in them.
Yeah, actually, that's like most of my poetry comes into this like kind of sci-fi, cosmic horror stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool how that background in sci-fi and cosmic horror kind of informs it rather than it being the central theme, if you know what I mean. It's not necessarily a sci-fi poem, but because of all the sci-fi you've written, that kind of bleeds into it and informs the theme of it. I really like that.
Yeah, I'm really weirded out by things, fourth dimensions and fourth dimensional hyper objects, and the idea of these kind of entities that can't be explained through myth, because I'm a very superstitious, I'm a religious person, as you guys are. So it's things that are kind of like weird outsideness, sort of scientific kind of things really freak me out. They're kind of like on the fringes of what I consider to be comfortable ideas. So I like to invoke them in my poetry and in my storytelling, because I don't write poems like for myself. I write poems because I want the reader to kind of go into this fantasy and like get freaked out. I read that poem to my one kinsman. He's like, that was like generally an unnerving, weird thing to hear. That actually, he's like, that actually kind of freaked me out a little bit. So that's like the fact that I can write something and it freaks people out. To me, that's important. That's a special thing, because in modern society, we don't feel actual fear anymore. You know what I mean? We are protected from the technosphere, from fear, from threats. So if I can write something and in meter and give it musicality and force this experience of fear or unsettling feeling, then that is like, to me, the highest thing that I can do. Right. So that's just kind of like the way that I look at certain things.
Yeah, that's an important thing. Like, fear is it's interesting. I don't know why we like fear. I don't know why it is that we watch horror movies, why it is that we see tragedies played out, why it is that we want to engage with the dark like that we do, but we absolutely do. I like it, that just called to mind the last time I got scared, like truly unnerved by a piece of art. I was driving down the highway one time at night, and I was listening to it's not even a song, it's like a soundscape by this artist called Nurse with Wound, which is sort of very much adjacent to some of the weirdest stuff that we listened to in our post-punk episode, with poetry read out by actually the guy from Current 93, David Tibet. And it's just this apocalyptic soundscape, this like, it almost sounds like thunder rumbling in the distance as the guy is just reciting this very apocalyptic sounding poem it's just very imagistic, and it's not about anything particularly. It just has this vibe to it or whatever. And I was listening to this song driving down the highway, and it freaked me out so bad. I was like, I have to pull over. I just can't keep going. I have to stop.
Yeah,
I don't know why I didn't turn it off. I pulled the van over to the side of the road. I was just like experienced it for the rest of the 11-minute running time or whatever. And then when it was over, I just was like, okay, all right, get your bearings. and then get back on the road kind of thing.
That's awesome.
It can, art can do that for you, right? And definitely like the unnerving aspect came through in that poem that you read there, Dave. So that's, I don't know why we like that. I don't know how it is that like art can do that to us, something that is not, in any way immediately threatening, but it can, and it can make us feel something on a very, very deep level.
I also go ahead.
I think that's part of the appeal, though, isn't it? Is that there isn't anything immediately threatening, but we're still entertaining that idea. And fear is a very authentic emotion. It's not something you can really fake convincingly. And I'm doing at the minute like an analysis on the Iliad, and I think it's something that people forget, that all of these animal metaphors of the and as a lion falling upon a herd of sheep, the warrior came down. That was an actual danger that people had to contend with at the time. This was like peasant shepherds would have to contend with violent animals trying to kill them and trying to kill their flock. These were real dangers. So these animal metaphors, they invoke like a very real fear for people at the time that we've kind of forgotten.
Mm. Yeah, there's a reason that guys like us, guys in arts, like there's so many guys that are big fans of there's genres of entertainment that we talk about a lot, like science fiction and horror and sword and sorcery and all of these kinds of things, because these are our versions of more ancient things, right? Instead of lions falling on flocks, or like some spooky folklore thing, we use cosmic entities from outer space or what have you to like invoke that, instead of Homer and everything, where we like sword and sorcery. That's because the kind of the core things that ancient art invokes are things like fear, things like passion, things like these very irrational, primal feelings, right? Lust, just like empowerment. There's just like the list goes on. And this is what we still want from our art. We want this very irrational, primal kind of thing to be thrusted upon us in our entertainment, right? So this is it ain't nothing changed. You go read the Iliad. It has horror, it has heroism, it has sadness, it has everything. It has tragedy. You read Beowulf, it has all of these things. It's these, like, Beowulf and Iliad are not that much different than like Warhammer 40K. They're really, truly not. There's heroes, there's enemies, there's evil, there's spooky stuff, there's all of the above, all packaged into this one thing to kind of take you on this irrational roller coaster of just emotive entertainment. It's magic. You know what I mean? So when the power of poetry is it really enshrines it in a magical form, which is meter and rhyme. These things like immortalize it and give it you guys know what I'm saying, right? So that's why I get excited about poetry. If the guys listening have heard me, I get excited. I like literally am over. I get goosebumps. There's a couple times here I had to stand up and like wave my arms around. It just excites me. I don't know why, but I'm just very passionate about this on a very irrational, primal level. And I think it's very important that we give that gift to everybody else so they can feel that too. Because modernity is mundane, it's boring, it's gay, it's cringe, and we don't feel human anymore. Mm-hmm. And those irrational feelings that get evoked from things like really dope poetry make us feel human again. And I think that to ignore this art form, this very ancient, primordial, ancestral art form that's woven into our DNA, to abandon it because a bunch of f***s like a couple decades ago were gay about it is a fucking crime. That's all I got to say. And that's why I love poetry, and that's why I want to fight to bring it back. And that's why it's so dope that Imperium Press is like printing all this poetry from guys like Taerus and Arthur Powell and the anthology. And I love it. I just love it all.
It feels like it's really coming back into swing. It feels like we're part of, I hesitate to say Renaissance just yet, but it feels like we're reinvigorating the art form. And that's a really brilliant and a great honor to be a part of.
Yeah, we are. Absolutely, we are. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, no, yeah. I would just say I wouldn't hesitate at all. It's here. We're here. We've arrived. The Renaissance is here. That's so I don't hesitate to say that at all. We're doing stuff. I read actually, I sort of a lot of my poetry a lot doesn't really get mentioned in this circle. When guys like mention the great poets in our circles, I don't really get thrown into that. And I'm not saying I'm a great poet, or I don't even know if I'm a good poet, but probably because my stuff's a little outside. But I did see there's a post going around. Somebody was talking in a chat about the great poets in the spheres. Obviously, Arthur Powell got mentioned. Nullus from Abnormocracy got mentioned. You, Taerus, got mentioned, and my name got thrown in there, which I was like pretty pumped about that I got considered among you guys, right? But when else has there been like this cluster of poets that are just putting out dope shit? You know what I mean? Just this like really, this like buffet, this cornucopia of all of these different styles, but all with this similar thrust of irrationality and passion and just the stuff that we're doing fucks. And like modernity, they don't have any dicks, dude. They're dickless. They got no vibe. You know what I mean? What we're doing has essence. It has ball sack. It's cool shit, and it's imaginative, and it's weird. And it's here. The Renaissance is here. And I'm not ashamed. I'm not, I'll say it. I'll shout it from the rooftops.
Hell yeah, man. No, it definitely slaps. Yeah, no, it definitely slaps like in a way that like I haven't seen in a long time. Not that I've gone out and like looked for poetry in a while. But yeah, and it does something for me, like, some of the like the best poetry in our sphere and of all time does something for me that like even a good movie can do or whatever. It kind of gives you strength. It makes you like, it just makes you want to go out and fucking punch somebody. Like it just gives you that, like, it just gets the fucking blood pumping and the testosterone flowing. Right. Like, and this is like what the best passages in Homer do. It's what, Arthur Powell's poetry does. I'm going to read out a quick poem by him because this is like, I think this is great. And it does exactly this thing, right? It just gets me jacked. It's called Boomer Lamentation. Unto the jaws of death once more, my son. Time and wealth have made us weak. Our folly to forget to water trees. Without the viscous red, their roots withered away. Through the valley now, without fear, do what we could not. And that's it. So yeah, that's like it. That gets me jacked, right? Like this is obviously like a boomer dad talking to his son and being like, "Dude, we fucked it, but you're gonna fix this shit, right?" And that's what we are set out to do. This is our destiny, right? I really do believe that, and I've said this with regards to the political aspects of our sphere, but I think it could be said about the aesthetic aspects too. That in a century there are going to be departments of universities dedicated to studying what we're doing. We absolutely are making a difference, and people are taking notice. I just posted something on the Imperium Press Telegram just yesterday to that effect. People in high places are taking note of what we're doing. And I think that this is the case also aesthetically as well. And part of what that involves is just this. It's the masculine poetry that just gets you fucking jacked. This is what it's all about, right? And I think the last thing I'm going to read is just this quick passage from the Iliad. That this is my favorite passage in the Iliad and one of my favorite parts, favorite passages in all poetry. And this is where Hector he's about to go confront Achilles. He knows he's going to die. Now my death cannot be far, is near. There is no hope of my escape, for so it pleases Jove and Jove's great archer son, who have till now delivered me. My hour at last is come, yet not ingloriously or passively I die, but first will do some valiant deed, of which mankind shall hear in aftertime. And that's it. This is what poetry is all about. This is what he's talking about. You know, Hector is going to his death, but he knows that even if he dies, which he will, he knows that his deeds will be sung in aftertime. He knows that he will not perish in unending night, as Horace says. He knows that the bard will sing his praises in this apodictic poetry for the rest of time. And this is what poetry can do for us. This is what poetry can do for our scene. This is what poetry can do for our folk. And it needs to be revived just for that reason alone, if not for every other reason, you know, like enjoyment and all the rest of it. It needs to be revived because it gives our people strength. And so people who say poetry is gay are just so far away from understanding who we are and what we're doing and how we're going to get to where we need to go.
Yeah, I just think the idea that poetry is gay is an indefensible position at this point. We have proven that poetry is an ancestral art form, is one of the oldest art forms. It is part of our identity as, you know, Western people, as, you know, white men, as men, sons and daughters of Europa. All of our mythopoetic, our creation, the stories of our people, the origins of our people, all of them, whether you're talking about the Eddas, whether you're talking about the classical stuff, the Odyssey and Iliad, whatever you're talking about, whether you're talking about the Kalevala, whatever it's called, the Finnish stuff, it doesn't matter. Whatever you're talking about, it's all in poetic form. It's who we are. It's who we've always been, right? So, and we've proven that we can adapt it to themes that we understand now today, but keep the mythopoetic current alive with it, right? We're not different people. We're our ancestors. We are our ancestors reborn. And while we might be in a dark age, we might be in a wicked world, right? We might be in the wolf age of the Kali Yuga. We are the same people, and these art forms are our song, right? I know it's a meme, and I've said this before, but what is this? You hear this all the time. Let me hear the song of your people, right? Let me hear the song of your people. I know that's a meme, and that gets put into jokes and everything like that, but that's a meaningful thing. Let me hear the song of your people is show me the art of your people that defines you, that defines your race, that defines your folk, that defines your culture. Ours is this form of poetry. There's plenty of other stuff as well, but ours is this ancient form of poetry, and it needs to be brought back, and we are bringing it back. In fact, we've already brought it back, and as Mr. Mike said, someday in the near future, there are going to be academics, a bunch of pencil neck, like guys wearing glasses, sitting around reading stuff from Taerus and Dave Martell and Arthur Powell and Nullis and Mike from Imperium Press, reading Imperium Press books, and they're going to be sitting here scouring, oh, what was the meaning of this, and blah, blah, blah. They're going to try to figure it out. But here in the moment, we are in the happening right now, and we are spitting it out, right, from the heart, because we are authentic. That's what separates us from the guys that poisoned and sullied the reputation of the art form of poetry. They were not authentic. They were a bunch of f***s. They were fake and gay, and we're based and real and authentic, and we speak from the heart, and we swing our dicks about it. So I'm sorry, I'm getting all vulgar, but that's a part of our authenticity, though, is we can write this beautiful classical, like high art stuff, and then we get on and we talk the way that people talk now. You know what I mean? Like it's like that thing with like a Trailer Park Boys, where Ricky's like, man, if I can't smoke and swear and be myself, then I can't really talk. I'm kind of the same way. You know what I mean? I can clean it up and I can be professional and all this kind of stuff, but I don't want to do that. I want to show people the inside of Dave, right? I want to show people the real Dave, and that's who we are. We're authentic. We're a little rough around the edges, but we have this warrior. We have the sword in one hand, and we have the scroll in the other. And I just think that's a beautiful thing, that we can bring all of this together in this fusion of all of the things that make us who we are. Rough and rugged and kind of vulgar and outrageous and out there and zany and weird, but also classical and beautiful and high-minded and erudite and all this kind of thing all come together to make this perfect storm of the European man. Sorry,
it's the Odinican, the Tyrrhic. It's the cultured thug. Ultimately, that's what we are. That's what the radical right is. It's that combination of high culture and just unabashed masculinity that is so dangerous. And that's why we're hated.
Yeah, based. All right, Mr. Taerus and Mike, do you guys have anything to say in closing? We're over 2 hours. I could do another 2 hours talking about poetry and reading poetry. I could do this, I could do a whole day of just reading and getting excited about poetry. But do you guys have anything to say in closing?
Yeah, I almost forgot that we were doing a podcast. I'm just having a really fun conversation and reading poetry. So yeah, I could do this forever.
That's the way it goes with the culture dads, bro. That's how we roll.
This must be what Elysium is like. You just sit and recount poetry and your great deeds.
With your boys.
Yeah,
with your boys, drinking beer and feasting on delicious food and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I would. I love it.
That's Valhalla right there.
That big time. That's what we're about on Culture Dads. We want to we talk about big brain stuff, but we also want to bring it back down to what is close to the hearth, as what Mr. Mike would say. So we are over 2 hours. We're gonna close it out. I got to go about my day. Mr. Mike needs to go to bed, so we're gonna close it out. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Blessings and hails to each and every one of you. Thanks again to Mr. Taerus for coming on. I really look forward to his book that's coming out, The Song of Berlin. It's going to be available. It might even be available when this episode drops. So keep your eyes peeled for that, and keep your eyes peeled for all of the other great Imperium Press releases. He's got the Imperium Anthology of English Verse out now. You got Dark Enlightenment from Nick Land out now. Lots of great stuff. So go over to the imperiumpress.org and buy some books and sign up for Culture Dads and the Gumroad and get great perks like hardback books. Man, I got a couple of these hardbacks. These things are just gorgeous. Some of the most beautiful books I have in my collection. And trust me, I have a big collection of books. It's got some competition and just as nice or nicer than all of the other ones that I have. So go over and sign up, support Imperium Press, help them grow and fulfill their destiny of becoming the institution that they were born to be. If you want to check out what I'm doing, go over to thebizarchives.com and buy some cool books, man. We got The Horror Beneath is about to drop from C.P. Webster. He was the author in Bizarchives 4 of The Reliquary. Really cool, old school cosmic horror novella. It's coming out very soon. You guys are going to love it. Buy other books. Follow us on Twitter and Telegram at The Bizarchives. And I'll see you guys next time here on Culture Dads, Age of Sword and Sex.